First story, the lantern returns to Ashford Hall. I never believed in hauntings until I watched the funeral for Jonah Mercer wind down Maple Street and vanish into wet earth. He was one of us, a sophomore who loved old film posters and leaving his window open in November. At the wake, his sister clutched the urn like a wound you could not see. When I moved into Ashford Hall the week after, the dorm felt hollowed. Lamps buzzed like trapped insects. People whispered Jonah's name for 2 days and then stopped, as if silence could push grief into corners. One midnight, a brass lantern sat on my threshold, glass fogged with a breath that was not mine. Its flame burned an unnatural blue. When I picked it up, a name slid into the silence: Jonah. Soon things shifted. A freshman woke with mud in her hair and an X carved faintly on her palm. Maya's emails grew jagged until they stopped. Her last draft read in capitals: "Do not trust the lantern." One night she was just gone. On a rainy morning, I found barefoot prints across the linoleum leading to Jonah's old room, room 6. Its door swollen and shut. The lantern lay on the mat with its blue light pushing at the edges of shadow. I opened the room and found Jonah's jacket folded on the chair, smelling of funeral polish and absence. He stood in the doorway like a photograph someone had turned back on. He looked like Jonah, but his eyes were wrong, the hospital gray of machines. He said simply, "I am hungry." We tried to bargain. I promised to tell his story, to lay flowers, to learn his jokes. For a while he seemed content, sitting in the lounge thumbing our textbooks. But the hunger was subtle. It fed on attention. Those who stared found friends unable to recall them the next day, faces blurred in photos, a week lost from the campus calendar. Jonah did not attack with teeth. He hollowed us out by erasing us from memory. Letters appeared carved, messages typed in terror. If you see him, one warned, count backwards, make no promises. We burned sage, left offerings of coffee, wrote words into ash. Nothing worked for long. The more we feared, the stronger he became. I learned his pattern. He thrived where remembrance wavered. If we refused to let him be the center, he took us instead. He wanted warmth, to be kept alive inside someone else's chest. On a night when rain battered the roof like pages torn, we gathered in the lounge to read letters. As I read aloud, the lantern rolled toward me, flame brightening like a grin. Jonah smiled. The room forgot its names in a ripple. Panic fed him. He swelled with our attention. I climbed to the roof with the lantern under my arm. Rain baptized the tiles, and the town below was a smear of lamps. I called Jonah's name until the syllables steadied like a rope. Each time I spoke, images returned. A face in a photograph sharpened. A sentence in a notebook found its last word. He came anyway, reaching for the lantern. I shoved it into the gutter. The blue flame screamed and dissolved in the rain. The glass cracked like a clock. For a breath, it seemed done. Memory knit back together. Faces returned. People remembered their friends. Relief warmed us. And in that warmth, Jonah whispered at my ear, "Thank you for remembering me. Now stay." He had not wanted to die. He had wanted to be kept alive inside someone else. The lantern broke, but something else slipped into me. A pattern, an insistence. The next morning, I woke with funeral ash under my nails and Jonah's jokes on my tongue. When classmates called out roll, I found myself answering to his name. I tried to refuse. I tried to hold my words. I write this because memory is dangerous and contagious. If you come to Ashford Hall, do not pick up a lantern you do not know. If a voice begs to be remembered, count backward, make no promises, and, most of all, do not keep him warm inside you. Remembering him cured nothing. It folded him into me. Second story, the lantern under room 217. I moved into Harrison Hall the week before autumn classes started, dragging a suitcase heavier than my quiet. At night, the dorm felt like a ship adrift. Corridors breathing, doors exhaling. My roommate, Evan, had left early for internship interviews in Boston. Claire lived across the hall and kept a string of fairy lights that never quite matched the dark. I thought I had learned how to be alone. The first night I heard it was not a voice. It was the slow hiss of the radiator, and then a single steady knock. 3 measured taps coming from the wall between my room and the empty unit next door. I pressed my ear to the cold plaster and felt the thud like a heartbeat. In the morning, I asked the desk clerk. He smiled with too many teeth and said the room had been empty since the previous resident, Mason, had died last winter. They had left his door locked as if the air could still keep him in. That evening, the knock came again, but closer, inside the wall, beneath the plaster, under the pipes. I told myself it was mice. I told myself many things. I pulled the blankets up to my chin and listened as the building settled into midnight. The third tap made me sit upright. I whispered, "Mason?" And the room fell so quiet I could hear the lights in the hallway change color. On day 2, a lantern appeared on the sill outside room 217. Not the kind you buy at campus stores. This one was old, with a handle that had been forged by fingers who knew how to keep flame alive. It was there at dusk, placed as if someone had set it down between hours. I walked over, fingers brushing cold glass, and felt a name press against my palm. Mason. The ink on the lantern was faded, but the S curve of his last name stayed like a scar. I brought the lantern inside and left it on my desk. Claire said it was creepy, which made me keep it. That night, the light fell wrong. Not warm, but watery, casting shapes that moved like students who had forgotten how to stand still. The knocking started again, but this time it came from the door. Someone rapped, soft and patient, as if waiting for me to remember a promise. "You shouldn't have taken that," Claire said the next morning. She had seen the shadows around my bed. She said the word Mason without breathing it. She said it because she was afraid I would answer. I told her I would return it. But when I tried, the hallway felt longer, like a memory that stretched. Room 217 was open now, a crack of space between it and the world. The paint inside was the same as the rest of the dorm, faded, pale. But the mattress was imprinted with a shape, as if someone had laid there and never left. The closet smelled like rain. On the desk, a notebook lay open. The handwriting was Mason's, slanted, careful, full of lists. I read one line, "If I am gone, leave the lantern behind." I placed the lantern back on its sill. That night, the knocking returned, not from the door or the wall, but from the ceiling above my bed. I sat up, heart trying to climb my throat, and saw a shadow sweep across the ceiling like someone passing on the other side of glass. The lantern flickered without wind. A breath touched my ear. It wasn't cold. It was empty. "You remember me?" A voice said, so close the words tickled the back of my neck. I had never spoken them before, but I answered yes. From then on, the dorm kept its own time. Lights flicked at the same minute every night. Doors opened to reveal corridors that led where they had led before, except for the ones that did not. Residents began to find notes under doors, small, neat, written in Mason's slanted hand. "Come see the lantern." People dismissed them. People laughed until the laughing changed. Claire stopped sleeping. She sat by the window and watched shadows climb the fire escape. She told me she kept hearing a song from the radio that stopped when she turned it off. She stopped coming to class. One morning, she knocked on my door at dawn, pale, trembling. "It knows your name," she said. "It called you out last night." Her voice broke like dry paper. I felt it, like a thread, pulling at something inside me. The knocking changed its pattern. It became a signal, a request, a command. People who laughed at first began to walk slower in hallways. The lantern grew warmer when nobody looked directly at it. I found myself talking to Mason as if he were a roommate who left for a weekend. I told him about my classes, about how I missed home, about the way the cafeteria served soup that tasted like nothing. Sometimes, when I said his name, the lantern burned brighter. Sometimes I heard a chair drag across the floor of room 217. On a rain-soaked night, I followed the sound. The knocking led me downstairs and past the common room, past posters that advertised events no one remembered hosting. I walked into the basement, a place students rarely went, and the air tasted like old letters. There, in the half-light, a circle of students sat with their hands on their knees, eyes wide, waiting as if for an exam. Mason stood in the middle, his form blurred like a reflection. He was smiling while the world fell apart. I saw the reflection of my own face in his eyes. "Why are you here?" I asked, voice shredded. Mason tilted his head. He did not speak like a living person. He spoke with the weight of missing things. "You left me," he said. "You left me alone." The words were not angry. They were only true. They told me later, or maybe I told myself, The story changed depending on how the night kept its secrets. There had been a night last winter when Mason paced the hall in snow, drunk on arguments he could not fix. There had been a fight outside room 217. There had been a shove. There had been an apology, too late. There had been a decision to leave, and then a step that should have been soft and became final. I found his funeral program tucked inside the lantern, my name listed among the attendees as someone who had seen him last. I remembered then a night when I had sought silence and left a door open. The memory was a sliver. It hummed. I had left room 217 door ajar, and in the morning, Mason was gone. He was gone, and I had gone to class. The lantern told me what I already knew. You must light it. Mason said that night as the circle thinned and the basement closed its mouth. Light it and remember. I took the lantern and laughed, because I am pathetic, because I wanted to believe this was a ritual we could finish. I lit the wick. The flame took like a memory. It cast faces in the brick. They say that when you ask a ghost for forgiveness, it either forgives you or eats you. I asked Mason to forgive me with a voice so small the rats did not hear it. He leant closer, so close I felt the cold of his breath. Forgiveness is a thing you give yourself, he whispered. I want you to stay. When the alarm rang the next morning, only Claire woke to it. Her bed was torn, her face wet. The others were gone from their rooms as if the dorm had not let them leave. Papers scattered in corridors like birds that fell from the sky. I opened my door, and the hall was long and empty. The lantern sat on the sill of room 217, no flame but warm. On the bottom, written in ink that smelt like rain, was my name, spelled correctly, no mistakes. I walked back inside the room and sat on the mattress that still kept the shape of Mason's body. The walls seemed to lean close to here. I thought I would cry. Instead, I felt the world tilt, the way a building turns when it decides. Mason came to stand over me, smiling with the sort of sadness that belongs to graves. He reached out, not with hands, but with the quiet that precedes night. Stay, he said, and I understood that staying was not a choice. The lantern flared without my will, and the flame wrapped around my throat like a promise. I tried to move, but my limbs were heavy with yesterday. I heard Claire at the door, whispering my name, her voice like fruit ripped too soon. The door refused her knuckles. It was locked from the inside, though nobody moved the bolt. I remember the sound of the knocking slow and gentle, like someone knocking to be let back in. I remember saying my name out loud, as if counting myself, and finding it was not the name I had been wearing. The basement lights flickered. The lantern burned brighter, and the flame spoke in Mason's handwriting, the letters curling into my skin. When they found me the next day, I was on the mattress, eyes open, holding the lantern. The hall had a new quiet. My phone was on the desk. My wallet was where it always was. My clothes smelled of rain. They said I had not been found in time. They said there were no signs of foul play. They closed the door to room 217 and left the lantern on the sill, just as it had been for months before. Now I walk the halls at night, knocking softly. I sit on mattresses that remember shapes. I place a lantern on the sill of the room I used to call mine. I wait for someone to come home late and laugh too loud, for someone to leave a door ajar. I learn names that I once loved. I call them with a voice that sounds like someone else's memory. They answer, sometimes in panic, sometimes with the relief of a student who thinks he has found a friend. Forgiveness, I have learned, is a lantern you cannot put out. It burns, and it finds a way through the walls. It wants company. It wants to keep the dorm from being empty, and once you light it, you do not get to leave. Before the next story begins, please subscribe to the channel, give a like, and leave a comment. Thank you in advance. Enjoy watching. Third story, The Lantern of Room 217. I moved into Harrison Hall the week the leaves began to bruise into autumn. My name is Ethan, and I told myself the scholarship, the cramped bunk, and the nights of cheap coffee and louder laughter would teach me how to survive college. I told myself a lot of things, but I never told anyone about the small brass lantern I found under the loose floorboard in room 217. I should have thrown it out. I should have smashed it into the concrete. Instead, I polished the glass, wound the tiny tarnished key, and set it on the windowsill where it caught the streetlight and made the dorm room feel older than it had any right to be. The first night, the lantern hummed. It was a sound like a throat clearing from somewhere hollow. I thought it was the building settling. But then Claire knocked on my door at midnight with her bag of instant noodles, and the way she stared at the lantern, so long, so careful, spooked me. She laughed it off with that careless smile she uses to hide fear. Marcus told me to stop making things into omens. But when he left the coffee half drunk and the light in the hall lingering too long as if reluctant to go. After that, the dorm rooms changed. Small things at first, socks folded wrong on the radiator, notes tucked under mattresses with names that were not ours. The bulletin board above the vending machine began to collect photos of older students, faces that had been there since the building opened, pinned with dates written in a hand that slid like water. I began to dream of a boy with a crooked smile, standing beside the lantern and watching me from the doorway. When I woke, my pillow smelled faintly of smoke. People started disappearing, not vanishing into thin air like in the movies. They left, and then their beds were made, and their mugs sat on the hall table, and their social media accounts posted things hours after they were gone. Pictures of places they never visited. Empty rooms captioned with the words, "I am going to sleep now." Claire stopped answering messages. Marcus went home for the weekend and did not come back. Rumors pooled in the laundry room and the dining hall like oil. 6 stories told in half laughs. We made a list of who had left, who had changed, who had started to speak to corners of their rooms as if someone else listened. One night, I heard the lantern laugh. It was soft and brittle and impossible to locate. I remember standing in the corridor with 2 doors wide open and the whole hall breathing, an intake and a long held out. The radio in the common room sputtered to life by itself, playing a song none of us recognized, and a shadow slid under the stairwell like ink. I felt something by my elbow, and when I glanced down there was a scrap of paper, edges singed, and on it a single line, "Remember me." I told myself to leave. I told myself to drive to the campus police, to call my mother, to burn the thing. But the lantern was a heat in my palm that would not cool. When I tried to throw it into the dumpster behind the hall, the lock on the back door would not turn. When I tried to hand it to Claire, she turned and hugged me and whispered, "You should have left it alone," as if she already knew the rules. One week into November, Harrison Hall held a funeral. They closed one wing. They said water damage, thunderstorms, a misplaced candle. They put out a list of counseling hours and a professional tone that refused to name the truth. Still, the rooms emptied. The names on the bulletin board were rearranged. A photograph slid down as if someone had exhaled too hard. On the night of the funeral, the dorms hummed with an undertow, and I sat on the windowsill in my old room and stared at the lantern like it was a wound. I remember thinking if I watched long enough, it might tell me who it belonged to, whose hand had wounded the key, whose breath had once warmed the glass. The answer came at 3 in the morning, a tapping at the ceiling, a soft, deliberate knock. The light outside the window dimmed, then brightened in a pattern that made my teeth ache. I listened to the tap, 1, 2, 3, then silence, then a whisper that slid down the plaster and into my chest like cold water. Ethan. My name, spoken in a voice that was both very young and very old. I swallowed and felt the lantern in my lap beat like a small heart. Room 217 opened its door, and in the threshold a shape stood. A boy in the wrong cut of a suit, hair flat as a photograph. He was not a shadow. He was an absence made into a body. He smiled with too many teeth. He had the lantern. You do not get to laugh at ghosts in real life. You cannot treat them like the stories that kept you up as a teenager. They do not appear for drama. They arrive for correction. He looked at me as if I had been expected, as if I had postponed something inevitable. He said, "You found my light. You kept it warm." And I had the sudden shrinking understanding that the lantern was not an object that held a spirit. It was a keyhole. We were the key. I tried to speak. My voice did not feel like my own. The boy, no name, I thought later, pushed the lantern toward me. From behind him, the hall doors opened and began to cough up faces. Claire pulling her sleeves over her hands. Marcus with his bag slung crooked. Not as they were, but as memories insist on returning. Pleading, hollow, utterly human in their brokenness. They walked past the boy and toward me with smiles that were too patient. When the lantern rested in my hands, the glass tempered to my touch. A warmth slid into my bones, and with it a ledger of nights I had not lived. The boy leaned closer and told me the small rules I had never wanted to hear. "You must keep the door lit," he said. "You must call them home. You must remember their names." I thought I could bargain. I thought I could hold the lantern and refuse its trade. But there is a moment in every bargain when you realize the thing wants more than compliance. It wants continuity. It wants a story that goes on and on. It wants a current to pass through new flesh. They came to me one by one, and I called their names like a litany. The hall answered in echo, and the lantern drank the echoes and grew heavy. At first, it was mercy. Soft faces softened. Then it gathered momentum. I felt my hands become an instrument. My voice rusted into their history until I could not tell the edges where I stopped and they began. When the sun bled weak and pink over Marbleton, the campus police found me on the windowsill with a brass lantern cooled and dull like bone. They took photographs, wrote statements, used words like psychotic break and mass hysteria and grief. Claire moved away. Marcus enrolled in a school across the country. The bulletin board went blank. The dorm locked room 217 with a sign that read "out of order." They did not find the photographs pinned under mattresses. They did not see the list I had scribbled on a napkin before the light took me. I had written names. I had written apologies. I had written a promise I no longer meant to keep. At night, people say you can hear someone on the stairwell. You can hear a knocking, regular and patient. If you stand by the window and press your palm to the glass, you can sometimes see the reflection of a man with a lantern looking back at you. He smiles at his own face. He is polite. He will tell you to remember. They think the nightmare ended, but memory is a tenant that never moves out. I wake sometimes with the taste of ash on my tongue and find that my hands have wound the tiny key. I find that I can call names in a half whisper and they answer. I do not leave Harrison Hall. I cannot. The lantern asks for continuity. It asks me to be steady. It asks me to keep the door lit for those who will not find their way back on their own. Tonight, there was a new knock. I opened the door. The corridor was empty. The lantern sat on the sill, and when I lifted it, the glass warmed with the outline of a fresh name forming inside, letters that were not mine yet. I put the lantern to my chest and spoke into the thin air as if speaking to a friend. Come home. I had not intended to become what I feared most. But in the small hours, after the walls rub away pretense, after the police reports and the lectures and the university's claims, truth is simple. I stay because someone must hold the light. I speak because someone must call them. I keep the door so it will open when the boy at the threshold arrives with his crooked smile. You will not believe me. You will tell yourself, this is a story to make the night smaller. But if you ever pass Harrison Hall and the stairwell coughs as you walk by, if you ever hear a soft knock at 3 a.m, then remember the brass, the key, the way a small flame can keep a memory living when everything else is allowed to die. Remember that some bargains are made in good faith and paid with worse things. With names, with nights, with the slow surrender of a man who only wanted to survive college. I am Ethan. I am the one who calls the names now. I am the one who keeps the lantern burning. And if you listen very closely, you will hear me whispering, come home. Fourth story, the lantern that remembered names. I moved into Harrison Hall in the late summer when the town of Brighton still smelled like cut grass and fried food from the county fair. I was 19 then, carrying a suitcase and a stubborn hunger for being somewhere new. The dormitory looked like every other brick building on campus, stiff, apologetic, promising nothing, but there was a narrow wing on the east side, the hollow wing, where the windows looked smaller and the lights hesitated to stay on. That was where I was put. Room 12 was tiny. The radiator hissed like an old man complaining. At night, when everyone else in the hall slept, the building sighed and rearranged itself into something older and less friendly. The first time I heard the whisper, I thought it was the pipes. I remember standing in the dark with a textbook under my arm, my breath clouding in the single bare bulb's light. Ethan. The voice was papered with wind, thin, patient. I told myself it was my roommate, Marcus, pulling a joke. Marcus laughed off everything. He said the wing had stories, an old student who never left, a lantern with a light that showed faces. We drank cheap beer and called those stories harmless, college folklore that kept freshmen up and mothers nervous. We wanted to be braver than the past. Then things started to happen that could not be explained as pranks. Books rearranged themselves on my desk so titles faced away like little turned heads. Claire from down the hall woke screaming about a shadow with her name stitched across its chest. The custodian found 4 footprints leading from the laundry room and vanishing into the drywall. I saw marks on the stair rail, a small crescent, as if someone had gripped steel and left a moon behind. The little things stacked into a pattern. The more I noticed, the more the dormitory polished itself into a memory. One night I heard the whisper again, closer this time, under the door, through the floorboards. Ethan. It said my name with such particular patience that my skin remembered being named long before I had been born. I opened the door. The corridor was empty. Yet, halfway down the hall, a light glowed in a small glass lantern hung from a hook by the laundry. It was not lit when I had come in. Now it burned with a cold, steady flame, pale as bone. I walked toward it because some part of me wanted to see the source of any fear and to put my foot on it. The flame did not flicker when I moved closer. Inside the glass, a face seemed to arrange itself out of soot and shadow, and when it spoke my name, the sound was the hollow of a throat. "You remember me," it said. I did not, but I believed it. Belief is sometimes the gateway to survival. I started to ask questions the way a person picks at a scab, gentle, because I did not want to invite whatever lay beneath to sing. The lantern answered in fragments. It told me of a winter, the year-long that the college had counted only in a string of losses. A student buried in a hurry, a funeral with too few hands to cover the coffin. It said that names had been left in pockets, taped to desks the way people leave keys under stones. Names went missing from lists. Names were collected like stray socks. When Marcus disappeared, the dormitory stood quiet for an entire afternoon, and then rumor moved like a slow mouse through the bulletin boards. He had gone out after midnight and never returned. They found his shoes neatly placed in the laundry, the laces knotted like promises. The police chalked the case into a folder and slid it under a desk. We said Marcus had left. He wanted a different life. The lantern waited on its hook and watched us pretend. The nights grew raw. I began to dream of a corridor that breathed, of doors that opened to other people's childhoods. In every dream, the lantern hung somewhere in the dark, naming things the way I used to name my own failures. Claire, Marcus, Ethan. It never shouted. It did not need to. When a name was called, the person would wake and look at their hands as if they belonged to someone else. They would leave the hall and never return. The college covered the absences with polite emails about housing options and transfers. The lantern kept counting. I set myself a ledger, like someone cataloging a pestilence. I wrote down each name it spoke, the hour, and what the person had eaten that day. The act of writing felt like an anchor. The lantern seemed to notice the ledger. One night it burned brighter, and the glass fogged with breath. Inside the fog, a name formed not with letters, but with pressure against the inside of my skull. It shaped like a bruise. It was Marcus's handwriting in a small, cramped scrawl. My hand trembled on the page. I tried to leave Harrison Hall, to cross campus to the bus stop and get out of Brighton entirely. I stood at the front door with my bag, my heart performing a sloppy drum beat. The street beyond the gate hummed with life, cars and a couple arguing about pizza toppings. I took 2 steps and the world folded inside itself. The lantern's whisper found the lining of my ear. "You left a light on." I turned back because the idea of a light forgotten somewhere had the weight of a child. When I reached the hollow wing, the building was different. The corridor was longer. The door to the stairwell, which should have been 2 doors down, was now halfway down the hall like a memory that had shifted. It is strange how ordinary things betray you. People become suspicious of you when they see a light on behind your door at dawn. They say you stay up too late. They say you are solemn now. They do not ask why your eyes are thin. I learned to answer with small, practical lies. I told them Marcus had found a job. I told them Claire had transferred. The lantern watched me with a patience reserved for old things. I found its history in pieces. An old newspaper in the library had an obituary that did not add up. A photograph of the hollow wing from decades before showed the lantern in front of the laundry, black and dry as a fossil. Older students called it a relic. A professor with coffee stains at the cuff said quietly that sometimes places remember the worst of us and keep it like a scar. He used a hand to smooth his coat like he was trying to iron the past flat. He did not meet my eyes. The ledger filled. Each name I wrote down flickered on the page like a tiny map of loss. I scribbled in the margins a question I could not explain. Why does the lantern take names? The graphite smeared and made the letters soft. When I turned the page, a new line had been added in my own handwriting. Ethan, room 12, staying. I did not notice the change at first. You do not notice the tightening of a noose until it begins to hum. I thought the naming was an exchange, a name for an absence. I believed there could be negotiation. The lantern had never shouted. It had offered me my own voice to bargain with. I used it to beg for a friend's life and to bargain menstrually with fate. The ledger insisted I was part of a ledgering process, a keeper rather than a victim. Then the lantern called my full name with the kind of affection an old person uses when they remember an old lover. I felt my name leave me like a house key tumbling through fingers. My pen fell. The page smelled like the hollow of a jaw. When I looked up, the door to room 12 was closed. My hands were not steady. My pockets were full of small folded things. A ticket stub, a note Claire had left me that said, "Call me," a little photograph of my mother. The items were warm as if recently touched. I thought I could outwit it and left a name in place of my own, an alias scribbled with nervous ink. The lantern considered the substitute and did not speak for a long while. Then it hissed a single syllable that sounded like a hinge. I understood with terrible clarity that the lantern did not collect names to erase them, but to remember them until they could not remember themselves. It kept them lit so they would not be swallowed by the small, careless forgettings of the world. But light can scorch as hand can hold too long. The lantern kept its charges close. It kept them whole. It kept them near. The last thing I remember before the corridor rearranged again was the sound of keys turning in locks that were not mine. Someone opened room 12. Light spilled like water across the floor. The lantern swung gently on its hook and caught that light and held it like a promise. My reflection in the window did not match me. It smiled and waved from the other side, patient and very old. Now, sometimes I whisper names to new faces on the hall. I hang the lantern in the hollow where the laundry room exhales steam. I tell them that I am trying to help, that the flame will remember what people forget. They ask to be moved. They believe us. They put their trust in practical hands and signed forms and campus staff with keys. They do not notice their pockets lighten. If you ever visit Brighton University and you find a narrow wing with smaller windows, do not assume the light you see behind the glass is harmless. If a voice says your name with an almost familial patience, answer it kindly. Say your name aloud as if to claim it. Do not try to bargain. Do not pretend you are leaving. Names are sticky things. They cling to the throat. And once you are called by the lantern, once it remembers you with love, do not think it will ever forget you again. Fifth story, lanterns over Jackson Hall. I learned to count the footsteps in Jackson Hall the hard way. My name is Evan, and I moved into room 217 during the last week of August at Ashmore University, a town the older kids called Holloway, but the brochure called Charming. At first it was small things, a light left on in the stairwell, a knock that matched my heartbeat at midnight. And I told myself explanations like a prayer. Students forget things. Pipes shift. Memories slip. Then Claire across the hall started leaving candles in the windowsill. She said they kept the drafts away. She smiled with that tired kindness strangers give at 3 a.m. We traded coffee for stories, and I told her about my scholarship, about my mother waiting in a small-town diner, about how I did not like silence. She laughed and said, "Then you shouldn't live where silence grows." I thought she was joking. It got colder faster in the building than the air outside. The radiator in my room coughed and then refused to work. The light in the corridor hummed low like a voice just below hearing. People moved in and out with semester beginnings and whispered goodbyes. One night, a freshman named Mark vanished between classes. His stuff sat on a bunk, and his toothbrush dried as if someone had stolen time. The campus police wrote an incident report and called it a missing person. The dean said we must be respectful. Claire put a candle on the hall table and did not speak for 3 days. The first unmistakable thing happened on a Sunday when rain slapped the window. I woke thinking someone had walked across my chest. I blinked, and the hallway lamp was not where lamps usually were. It hung on the stairwell railing, swinging slowly though there was no wind. Inside it, a tiny flame burned blue, steady as a heartbeat. It was not lit by wax. The glass held a soft, skin-toned light like a memory of fire. I cut through my pajamas and opened my door. Claire stood at the foot of the stairs, pale, hair loose, and her eyes were the kind of wide that means the world just learned it is small. She whispered, "They remember names." I asked who. She said, "Everyone who left a light behind." After that, the lanterns came. They did not appear in the daytime. They gathered at the thresholds, under doors, by beds, at the edge of showers. They waited. At first, they were few, a single lamp by the study table, 2 by the vending machine. Then they multiplied, soft and inevitable. They never seemed to burn anything. They only watched. I learned to move around them, to slide through the sickly glow as though the light were a body with breath. People started dreaming of the same hallway. The dreams were not identical, but they had the same corner where the paint peeled into the shape of a face, the same patched carpet slick with rain, and at the far end an old wooden lantern swinging without a pull. In my dream, someone called my name in a voice that tasted like pennies and winter coats. I woke with my throat raw. One night, I found Mark sitting on the floor of the common room, as if he had always been there, knees pulled to his chest, eyes shiny from crying. He said he had been somewhere you do not leave. He said the lanterns had shown him a room with every lost thing in it and asked for only one name until he agreed. He would not say whose name. He would not say how he left. He only traced a circle on the linoleum and whispered, They asked for me." By October, half the dorm avoided the East Wing. People slept in the library, in cars, in rooms with friends. The dean posted memos about mental health resources and curfew. My mother called every week, and I told her I was fine. Claire slept with the candles lit and read out loud from a battered copy of Emily Dickinson, as if the poems themselves could hold the place where things leak out. She began leaving little notes in the stairwell. "I am here," she wrote, "I am here," and taped them under the banister like offerings. Then the knocking started. It came slow at first. 2 soft knocks that walked across the plaster like a small animal. Then the knocking learned rhythm and arrived in the small hours, right where the wall met the doorframe of room 217. Everyone blamed pipes again. The knocking would stop the second you stood up to listen. Once I pressed my ear to the wood and it clicked, a sound like someone rapping fingernails against a coffin lid. The next morning, a student found a name carved under the stairs. It was Mark's name. The letters had been there before. They were not there now. The wood bled resin in the shape of little, patient moons. I began to keep the lights on. I thought light would hide me. It did not. The lanterns obeyed a logic I could not understand. They shunned bright bulbs, but flocked to the soft, yellowed light of dorm hall lanterns and the wax of candles. One night I woke at a precise hour. It felt like a practice someone had studied. And there were 5 lanterns arranged in my doorway, patient as elders. They did not sway. They did not flare. They held a hollow sound like breathing. I opened the door because I wanted to know where they went. The hallway was empty, but for a trail of faint footprints in the dust leading to the stairwell. I followed them down to the basement, where the building's bones leaked cold and old newspapers turned to confetti. In the basement, on the laundry room table, sat a photograph of Jackson Hall from years before I was born. The windows were dark, and in one window a single lamp burned blue. Behind me, Claire said my name, and when I turned, she was not the same. Her eyes held the hall. She touched my arm with fingers that smelled of smoke and said, "They take what you forget." I asked, "What do they want with my name?" She said, "They only need to remember, and their remembering is heavy." We tried to leave. I packed a bag. Claire left her candle in the sill and did not look back. We walked to the door, and the lanterns were on every threshold like a congregation. They did not block us. They did not move. As we stepped into the cool night, a voice, not wholly human, said, "In here we keep things that wander back." The air tasted like pennies and a tired kind of longing. Claire laughed, low, broken. She said, "If they remember you, they will not let you go." I thought she was being melodramatic, and I kept walking anyway. The buses were gone by the time we reached the curb. In the distance, a siren breathed. I turned for one last look and saw the dorm windows like dull eyes. The stairwell lamp swung, and inside it burned a single blue flame. It winked as if at an old companion, and then, with the patience of a thing settling to sleep, the flame rose and coalesced into a shape like a person. It walked down the stairs, lantern in hand, carrying its light as one carries a lantern through weather. It passed through the door without opening it. The last thing I remember is us at the bus stop and Claire's hand slipping from mine. I did not notice at the time. When the bus pulled away hours later, Ashmore washed under a lamplight. My phone buzzed with a message from someone whose number I did not know. "Do not come back." Beneath it, in a font that looked like handwriting, a single line: "They are counting names." People still tell versions of what happened. Students swap theories about old wives and vengeful spirits and the building's foundation sitting on a graveyard of forgotten things. But there is one truth nobody will say aloud. If you leave a light burning in Jackson Hall, something might remember it. If something remembers, you might be called back as tenderly as a bell. If it calls your name, do not answer. If you answer, the hall keeps what you forgot. And sometimes, the hall learns to carry you inside its lanterns so carefully that no one notices you are missing until they open the stairwell and find a fresh name carved into the banister.